Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, shock but no surprise as an Indian investigative journalist confirms Avtar Singh Khanda was murdered by the Indian state and details Indian intelligence operations against Sikhs globally. We'll have more on that in a moment. In the United States, the Sikh coalition sets out its policy priorities for Sikh grassroots campaigns for this year. So, if you want to get active, then find out what you should be active about. And the legendary Sikh general Hari Singh Nalwa makes a return to Kartarpur. Not literally, sadly, but his bust has been installed at the Kartarpur Corridor Gallery. No doubt to send a little message to their Indian neighbours across the border, just demonstrating who are the true friends of Sikhs in Punjab. All this and more on today's show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of great comments. So thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience for your contributions. Right, let's get underway. And yes, there is a new book that has been or is about to be released. And it's doing the promotional rounds. Its author, Anirudh Mitra, is doing his promotional rounds on the media circuit to push his new manuscript. And this guy, Anirudh Mitra, he is an investigative journalist and, of course, an author. And he's penned this book. It's called The Delhi Directive, Once You're Marked, There's No Escape. I think the title speaks for itself in many ways. He is actually, as it turns out, he is one of India's leading national security writers. And he's publicly stated in this book, apparently, in this book, in India's Corridors of Power, I beg your pardon, let me start that again. In India's Corridors of Power, that's his quote in his book. It had a British Sikh activist Shaheed by Avtar Singh Khanda poisoned. Those are the actual words he used. So India's Corridors of Power, by that read the Indian state, had by Avtar Singh Khanda poisoned. Of course, for those, I'm sure most of our audience will be aware of who Avtar Singh Khanda is. He was a very high-profile Sikh activist, Khalistani activist, who passed away a couple of years ago in here in the UK, and very, very suspicious circumstances. Now, Mitra, he's this former journalist turned screenwriter and national security propagandist. So he's very much aligned with the Indian states, and he often boasts about his access to senior government and intelligence agents. So he claims he's got these really strong, reliable links to Indian intelligence, of course, RAW, NIA, etc. And he made this statement as part of promotion for this new book. And of course, he does this statement of corridors of power, obviously unambiguously refers to the Indian government and its instruments in the form of its intelligence agencies. Now, most Sikh organisations who've seen this and have jumped on this, they've shared clips of Mitra himself exposing India's overseas terror. Well, certainly over the years we've been doing that. And again demanding the UK government publicly acknowledge and call out India's extrajudicial killings. Because clearly the murder of Avtar Singh Khanda, apart from the fact it's just a simple, plain, straightforward criminal act, it's also an act of transnational oppression because it was perpetrated by the Indian state, certainly according to this guy. Now, Avtar Singh Khanda himself, he was a huge advocate of the Khalistan movement here in the UK, and he was a very respected voice here in his community. And he died in 2023 from suspected poisoning. But the official cause of death was on the death certificate ruled as acute myeloid leukemia. And this is despite the fact that he had been apparently in perfectly good health right up until literally 2 or 3 days before his death. Suddenly he is admitted to hospital, to ICU, to intensive care, and literally died just a few days later. He went downhill from apparently perfectly good health, passing away literally within a few days. The British state has very clearly covered this up. The coroner's office, basically the state office designed to uncover any mischief that might have happened, has passed it on to the Metropolitan Police. Metropolitan Police likewise have said, oh, it's the coroner's office. They've basically passed it between them, saying it's nothing to do with us, nothing to do with us. And basically a basic autopsy was carried out, but no toxicology. This is the key here. No toxicology was carried out. Toxicology in the context of other murders by India and in the context of everybody in the community saying this guy was murdered. And a proper toxicology report would have uncovered the truth, if indeed there had been some form of poison used. But of course, for some reason, the British government decided not to pursue this. The Metropolitan Police decided not to investigate it properly. It deliberately ignored its usual protocols surrounding a death of this nature. Anyway, but back to this book. And Mitra says that the murder of Khanda was done for, quote, protection on the record. Khanda was basically openly cited as a target for India for years before his death. And it was based entirely on unproven and at times provably false accusations of terrorism linked to his Khalistan activity. And for example, one of the reasons that the Indian Govt media actually essentially mentored this murder from a media perspective was he was falsely accused of tearing down the Indian flag from the Indian High Commission in London at a protest just 2 or 3 months earlier before his death. As a result of that accusation, which flew across the mainstream media in India, he was specifically named and his photo was posted up on the Govt media. Even social media Hindutva accounts said, this guy, in as many words, said this guy's going to get killed. He deserves to die. Lo and behold, he passes away in highly suspicious circumstances not long after. As it turned out, he wasn't the guy who tore that flag down. It was nonsense. It was the whole thing was a completely false accusation. Anyway, but according to Mitra, Khanda was one of 2 killings India conducted in the UK, with another 64 and a total of 66 overseas targets killed by Narendra Modi's regime through the RAW and NIA operatives. Now, the death of Khanda was part of a larger transnational repression campaign, which was first spoken about, obviously on the public stage, by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Canada around this sort of time. And that declaration by Justin Trudeau it caused a geopolitical wave, actually. I think ripple's an understatement, a wave that's still resonating, that's still perpetuating today. He spoke in the Canadian Parliament totally publicly to his own political detriment regarding the assassination of Hari Singh Nalwa, another Khalistan leader shot dead outside his Gurdwara in British Columbia, and where, of course, he was the president. And that was just days after Avtar Singh Khanda died. So again, the context of these killings, the implication is so clear that clearly Avtar Singh Khanda had to be murdered as part of the same campaign. Likewise, not long after, the FBI foiled an Indian state attempt to assassinate Gurpreet Singh Pannoon in New York. Another Khalistan activist, the co-founder of the Sikhs for Justice and the main founder of the referendum. And Pannoon, of course, fortunately survived this assassination attempt only because it was thwarted by the DEA, I think the Drug Enforcement Association, where one of their operatives was actually hired by an Indian operative as a hitman to kill Pannoon. So, Sikh public figures, and particularly Khalistan activists, have been killed right across the world, from Italy to India to Pakistan. We've talked about many of these. And they've all been either assassinations or mysterious circumstances in these over that sort of 2-year period from 2022 up until about 2024. And these incidents are now generally considered to be part of this anti-Sikh and particularly anti-Khalistani transnational repression campaign coming directly from the top of the Indian government. Now, reports, and we've covered all sorts of reports from Bloomberg, the Washington Post in the United States, the Guardian newspaper here in the UK, which is, I have to say, a very good outlet. They've been on this for a long time. They've confirmed this very campaign of transnational repression, particularly coming from India. And they actually refer to it as Indian nationalist terror. And they've shown all sorts of interviews, intelligence agency sources, and that's key there, is that their own sources, they've done their own investigative journalism, which likewise actually aligns with Mitra's book. And they likewise confirm this whole campaign of murdering Khalistanis globally goes all the way to the top of the Indian government. And India have actually since boasted about their own overseas terrorism, which is a line that Mitra seems to be pushing as part of his own relentless media campaign for this new book. And his promotional tour for this book He's been interviewed dozens of times. Apparently, he's appeared on Indian media, right across the mainstream media, and he praises figures like the head of RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, Ajit Doval, for, as he quotes, protecting India. And don't forget that Ajit Doval himself has said we will basically take any means necessary to protect India. Again, he himself implied that they would murder what he would see as enemies of the Indian state. And don't forget, Narendra Modi, let's refer back to last year's general election in India, where in one of the final speeches that Narendra Modi made to his BJP supporters, he actually said, "We will come into your homes and we will kill you." The very words of Narendra Modi. So again, the whole premise of what Mitra is saying in his book is even supported by the senior politicians and the very Prime Minister of India itself. So again, we know it's true. And they've also been promoting this idea of a Delhi directive, which, and again, this is where the titles come from. Basically, a Delhi directive means it's the Narendra Modi government is sending a directive to kill Khalistanis. And again, it's quite sinister, the title of this. Once you're marked, there's no escape. And basically, it's promoting India's transnational repression. And it is obviously part of this attempt by Narendra Modi and the RSS to appeal to this fanatical Hindutva fan base, which sees Modi and his government as almost like a strong new breed of India, Hindutva forces, Hindu Rashtra. It's all about this we are the superior race, which is basically the ethos of the RSS. We are a superior race, which is why it mirrors so dangerously closely to the Nazi ideology of the 1930s in Germany. Mitra, amongst his promotional efforts, he's also spoken on how the Bishnoi gang have been linked to the extortion crisis, particularly in Canada, but not just Canada, certainly in the whole of North America. But he points out in this book how the Bishnoi gang, he points out it works for, quote, the Indian government, carrying out killings, which included, for example, he says, Sidhu Musewala, and of course Hari Singh Nalwa, amongst many others, with, quote, and again a quote from the book, New Delhi's backing and blessing. And then he also went on to say that India has many mercenaries, quote, at its disposal. So in other words, these are killers for hire. And again, it's a shock, but it's no surprise. It's a shock to actually hear somebody admitting it so publicly. We know it's been going on. We've been talking about it for months, if not years. But here we go. Somebody deeply connected and actually on side of the Indian government. He certainly is a supporter of the Indian government. He's making it public and he's almost boasting about it. And of course, right across North America, there are individuals who are now openly accused, even by law enforcement in North America, of working for the Indian government. They are now on trial. But Sikh groups, all the while, have been questioning why the UK is still ignoring blatant foreign interference on its soil. And again, back to Avtar Singh Kanda. We, and certainly on this show, we've been shouting loudly ever since Shahid Khanda was murdered, that the British government is failing in its duty to investigate this. And again, it's in light of this book must surely reinvigorate and re-incentivise, certainly re-incentivise organisations here, but reinvigorate the whole campaign to investigate Khanda's death. I mean, only weeks ago, I reported the Guardian newspaper here in the UK said it is still looking to kill two other British Khalistan activists, which again, because of course they've just been again reissued their warnings, their threat to their lives by law enforcement, that their lives are literally in danger from the Indian state. But yeah, I mean, as I said, we have said all along, and the Sikh community knows all along, that Avtar Singh Kanda was murdered by the Indian state. Why is the British government doing nothing about it? We know why, because again, we talk about it regularly. For some reason, the British state is beholden to the Indian establishment. The British establishment is so closely connected to the Indian establishment, it is essentially protecting the Indian establishment. It is burying the truth that Avtar Singh Kanda was most likely murdered by Indian operatives. So there you go. But there it is in black and white. The Delhi Directive, once you're marked, there's no escape. I think that's pretty unambiguous about the accusation there. And to remind you, this guy, Anirudh Mitra, is very closely aligned and certainly very closely connected to the Indian state. So he knows probably the truth. And he's written it. There you go. Right, let's move on. And the United States, North America, the Sikh Coalition, which has been this very effective body to promote issues pertinent to the Sikh community, has set out a new policy document. Excuse me whilst I have a mouth of chai. They have just issued their policy priorities. This is an important document. I do often talk about, and I refer to the Sikh Coalition on a regular basis, about their initiatives. They are very much at the forefront, the vanguard of promoting Sikh issues in the United States. They are a hugely powerful lobbying organisation, and I have to say a hugely successful lobbying organisation on behalf of the community in North America. No, I say North America, particularly in the United States. They have been very powerful in their lobbying of politicians at state level and at federal level. They've got a long list of great achievements. So certainly I'm a huge fan of the Sikh Coalition. As I say, they've done so much good work for the community. And they've done it in a very fair manner, I have to say. They're not openly pro-Khalistan. They're not openly anti-India. I temper that slightly. They certainly lay blame where it's due. But they are deliberately, in all their language, they're always very diplomatic, very careful. They have to be, because they do operate at very high levels. In Washington, their lobbying representatives talk to some senior people, in American politics. So they can't be as let's just say as passionate and as quite loud and potentially rude as I am sometimes. And people like Gurpreet Singh Padu, again, we tend to be a little bit more sort of robust, should we say, in our campaigning for issues like Khalistan. So the Sikh Coalition is basically the essential body that acts in a very diplomatic and therefore a very effective way to get Sikh issues across the line. In other words, to get the politicians in North America to wake up, understand what the Sikh community cares about, and therefore enact policy and legislation that protects the community as required. So that is basically the good work. As part of that, and the backbone of this work, they need to understand and they need to make the community aware of these are the policies that we are fighting for. These are the policies that represent the main issues in our community, and these are the policies that we, as a united community, must be active about. These are the policies we must align with and push, because we can't have the whole diaspora just campaigning as individuals or small groups about different little bits of things, because that's a scattergun approach which is not effective. This is a bit more of a sniper approach. These are the policies we must all together unite and align behind as one united voice, because that then is a more powerful and more targeted approach which gets these things done. If we all just go out there and campaign individually about 100 different issues, nothing will ever get done. So this is the power of this document. So this document is saying, read this, these are the issues we must align behind and campaign in this manner on these issues. And I'm going to quickly go through this so you can have a flavour of what it's all about. Now, there are no big surprises in here, of course. Of course, everybody in the community knows what matters to the community. But essentially, it's the different document. Here we go. So, of course, everybody in the community knows these issues and are probably deeply and sadly very acquainted with these issues. They cover the main areas, which includes hate and hate violence, inclusive education, anti-bullying, workplace discrimination, immigration, a big one, transnational repression, likewise, and then it says at the end, resolutions and proclamations. I'll come on to that in a moment and explain what that is about. The introduction, again, it's all sort of verbiage, all predictable verbiage, but what it does say is the Sikh Coalition state policy priorities is a roadmap for engaging with state-level policies that intersect with the Sikh Coalition's civil rights priorities. In other words, this is the document that you need to align by, as I said in the intro, that gets these things pushed across the line at state level. So, okay, so I'll just quickly flick through these. The first section, hate and hate violence. So it says, in general, the Sikh Coalition supports policies that expand the range of protected classes covered by the hate crime statutes, ensures that hate crimes can be charged as such, even if they're committed with mixed motives. In other words, if there is a hate crime, if even the crime even has a small element of hate within it, it must be recorded as a hate crime. And I talk regularly about that, how important the data is in these things. Data drives policy. Policymakers can only change policy or create policy if they have the data to back it up. To cover gaps in existing hate crime statutes, and it gives a few examples of that where there are gaps, provide for or mandate hate crime training for law enforcement. SB 509 is a big story we covered, and in fact that's covered later in this document. But basically it's ensuring that law enforcement and all the state bodies are trained on how to deal with these sorts of issues, particularly hate crimes. Mandating the accurate recording of hate crime data and the reporting of that data to the FBI on an annual basis. And again, very important, as I often bang on about. Create and fund victim support services, speaks for itself. Create and open pathways to restorative justice programs when fitting, including educational programs, mental health support, etc., etc. Now, it will always oppose policies. This report splits each section into what it will support and what it will oppose. Now, on what it will oppose in hate and hate violence, to rely exclusively on mandatory minimum sentences, penalty enhancements and other punitive measures as the solution for hate. It's saying that is not the right way to go about this to deter future crime. It will not elevate any one faith tradition, including Sikhi, as a protected class. In other words, it's got to cover everybody, not just Sikhi. Conflate criticism of a foreign government with bias or hate violence. In other words, if you criticise a foreign government, that must not be seen as a hate crime. Again, it's very much a freedom of speech argument here. We will always oppose anything that stops us being free to criticise another government. If that is seen as a hate crime, that is wrong. We will oppose that. And that is a theme that is very common throughout this whole document, the supporting and reinforcing and maintaining the freedom of speech. It will always oppose policies that sanction the use of racial or ethnic profiling in anti-terrorism efforts, a very important one, that one, and it will always oppose promoting surveillance of Gurdwara, mosques and other places of religious worship. Inclusive education and anti-bullying. And again, this is an important one, particularly for the youngsters, the young generation. This is where schools are important, educating our young. And again, I've had loads of stories over the past few years about how the Sikh Coalition have been very effective in changing policies when it relates to schools, whether it covers bullying that occurs in schools or changing the curriculum. And as I say, they've had some massive successes, particularly in this area. So they will generally support policies that strengthen and fund anti-bullying efforts and programs. And it will support inclusive curricula. And it gives lots of examples, actually, where it has been very successful in that area. It will also support policies that serve diverse student bodies, teachers and administrators, including support for producing resources in multiple languages for students and families. And again, it's not just specific to Sikhi. Obviously, it will have a focus on Sikhi, but again, it's a broad church, saying we'll always support policies that broaden education of our young about all religions equally. That's the important point. And it will also support policies that increase institutional oversight in educational spaces. In other words, the state, the US government must be allowed to ensure that it has complete oversight and accountability to ensure that the curricula are fair and are not prejudiced and influenced by Hindutva. Important point that. And in general, it will always oppose policies that elevate the role of any one religion over others in the classrooms. In other words, they must all be treated as equal. And again, watch out for the the RSS influence there. It will always oppose policies that tamp down on academic freedom and honest, nuanced discussions in classrooms. Again, the freedom of speech element comes in there. It will oppose policies that circumvent state-specific social studies standards processes in favour of outside advocates. That's a lot of big words, basically saying we don't want RSS-affiliated curricula influence here. In other words, we've reported on the past where the RSS and certain bodies like the Civics Alliance, it refers specifically to this, I did a specific story on this, the Civics Alliance, which basically is another affiliation of the RSS, it has deliberately gone out there to influence the school curricula across North America to push the Hindu narrative, push narratives where, for example, Sikhs are seen as terrorists. It always refers to Sikh terror, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s, etc. So again, they will always push policies. The Sikh coalition will always ensure that the RSS is pushed out of any influence of schools. And finally, supplant the role of professional school counsellors with volunteer chaplains. Ohio's HB 531 shows the risks of such chaplaincy proposals, etc., etc. There's a lot of detail on that I don't really have time to go into. Workplace, of course, from the school to the workplace. Discrimination, of course, this is a big problem, actually. And again, we've reported on this. It will always support policies that ensure robust protection against religious discrimination at state level. It will support policies that advance inclusive accommodations, policies for uniformed employees who maintain articles of faith. The Kirpan, yes, big story. I don't need to go into too much detail about that. We cover that on a regular basis. Articles of faith in the workplace. It will always support policies that ensure we have the freedom to wear our articles of faith. To ensure the robust enforcement of anti-retaliation laws, that protects the rights of employees who engage in protected activities, including filing a complaint, etc. Further education and legal resources for workers. In other words, it encourages education and legal resources for workers, particularly Sikh workers, and prohibits caste discrimination. Another area that we talk regularly about in the workplace in America, big tech being a prime example of that. It will oppose policies that don't address the full scope of potential religious discrimination in the workplace. Policies that weaken enforcement measures, in other words, any policies that are brought in to try and reduce or weaken the effectiveness of policies that help Sikhs in the workplace. And it will always oppose policies that rely only on punitive schemes without support. In other words, it must be a balanced approach. If somebody does wrong, they mustn't just be punished. They must be supported and helped, educated to change their views. Big area, immigration. The topic of the moment. It will always support policies in general that move to limit immigration enforcement at areas formerly designated as sensitive locations, gurdwaras, places of worship, etc. That one really speaks for itself. It will always press for accountability measures related to the conduct of federal agents, ICE, engaged in immigration enforcement activities. Again, I don't need to explain that really beyond that. I think we're all very familiar with that one. It will bolster data privacy for communities by limiting the collection, retention and sharing of sensitive personal data. And it will support policies that protect the religious rights of detainees. You must be allowed to retain your dastar, for example, articles of faith, etc. And then it will oppose policies that mandate state and local law enforcement's collaboration with immigration enforcement beyond legal requirements. This is all about mission creep. In other words, like, for example, Trump's issue recently of giving ICE and ICE agents greater powers, less accountability. So they will always oppose policies like that. And they will oppose policies that create penalties around specific kinds of immigration policy, including criminal charges for lawmakers or funding-related threats for entire jurisdictions that advance sanctuary protections, amongst many other things. So again, that's a big area. Sadly, we don't have time to go through that, but I think we're all familiar with most of those issues anyway, because those campaigns I talk about on a regular basis. Transnational repression features widely, unsurprisingly. They will support policies that train law enforcement on transnational repression. SB 509, Governor Gavin Newsom, who vetoed that one in California recently, outrageous. But of course, that was another great bill that was supported by the Sikh coalition, and they will continue to support bills like that. In general, they will oppose policies. One I've missed is they will support policies that define transnational repression. Again, an important area. But they will oppose policies that create new criminal penalties or sentencing enhancements around TNR, because all forms of TNR are already crimes. So it's all about context, not prosecutorial tools that local law enforcement need to keep communities safe. They will also oppose policies that cast suspicion on entire communities in the course of attempting to counter TNR. Now, it's all about discrimination. Don't paint everybody with the same brush. And then finally, as a sort of final section, these are about what it calls the resolutions and proclamations that it will deliberately support and promote in all its campaigns. And this, of course, includes things like Vaisakhi, obviously. Sikh Awareness and Appreciation Month, and often that is celebrated around the time of Vaisakhi in April, but usually celebrated in November in California. Actually, I didn't know that. It will also definitely promote anniversaries related to the Sikh genocide, Operation Blue Star, of course, and the genocide in later that year in October, November. It will also promote anything to do with key events to do with Sikh human rights defenders. For example, the September death anniversary of Jaswant Singh Kalra. And again, Jaswant Singh Kalra, the Shaheed, who we talk about again on quite a regular basis, the Canadian, he spoke in the Canadian Parliament about the terrible activities of the Indian state for which he gave his own life. Of course, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurpurab, his birthday, and the recognition of local Sikh history, such as major anniversary of a Gurdwara's formation. So it will always promote at a local level. If you've got key events at a local level, it will, again, promote those sorts of things. So that is the document. It's a very good document, as I said in the intro. It's a very important document because it sets out the main priorities of the Sikh community, certainly at a political lobbying level across the United States. So, and I know many of you out there are involved in activism. I know many of you support probably all of these policies in here. But again, like I said at the early stage of this discussion, don't just go out there in a scattergun approach and just campaign about anything particular. Look for where, particularly in America, where the Sikh Coalition are organising protests, organising lobbying campaigns, channeling people into more united, more cohesive and larger groups, because those larger groups, when they're campaigning, have a bigger effect, obviously. It's a bigger hammer. You can't go in there with a little hammer and tap, tap, tap away. You need to go in, all of you united, wielding a sledgehammer. And that is the way to actually succeed in pushing these issues across the line. So there you go. Right, let's move on. And I love this story. This is Hari Singh Nalwa. And Hari Singh Nalwa, a bit of a legendary figure. Delighted to say that he has returned, sadly not in the flesh. I'd be a bit worried if he did, but he has returned in the form of a bust at the Kartarpur Corridor Art Gallery. So this has been described as a significant course correction, where the Pakistan government, bless them, well done to the Pakistan government, has actually sanctioned the installation of a bust. For those who don't know what a bust is, it's the upper body. It's a statue, basically, of the upper body of somebody. So they've sanctioned the installation of a bust of the legendary Sikh general, Sardar Hari Singh Nalwa, at the Kartarpur Corridor Art Gallery, formally unveiled just a few days ago, February the 1st. And the project was conceptualised by a guy called Gurinder Pal Singh Josan, president of Sikhs in America, and it was actually sculpted by a gentleman called Jagdeep Singh Billing. Now, this installation, sadly I don't have a picture of it. I couldn't find a picture of it. I will try and find one out. This installation, unsurprisingly, it's hugely symbolic because it comes nearly 3 years after an 8-foot metal statue of Hari Singh Nalwa was controversially removed from Haripur district in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province due to pressure from local religious groups. Sadly, it was an act that was obviously condemned by Sikh groups, particularly by the SGPC, as what they called an erasure of history. Now, the return of Nalwa's likeness to Kartarpur is actually being hailed around the world, actually, as a historic moment that acknowledges Sikh contributions to that region's heritage. Sadly, that region, through a quirk of fate, really, in partition in 1947, the Gurdwara, the final resting place of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the Gurdwara, landed on the wrong side of the border for Sikhs in Indian Punjab. So they had to go up what's called the Kartarpur Corridor. I'll show you that in a moment, actually, what the Kartarpur Corridor looks like. But they have to do this pilgrimage, basically across the border, India into Pakistan, to visit this very same Gurdwara. And but why is this important? And who was Hari Singh Nalwa? And of course, I'm sure most of us will be aware of who Hari Singh Nalwa. But for those who don't, we must first actually really understand why he was so important. He was around in the 19th century. He actually passed away in 1837, which actually is the very year that Queen Victoria came to the British throne. So he passed away just as Victoria came to the British throne. But he does remain this legendary, this towering hero for Sikhs. He was the commander-in-chief of the Sikh Khalsa Fauj under Maharaja Ranjit Singh during the time of the empire. He was basically he was the key soldier, he was the big general, the commander-in-chief, the big cheese, as they say. And he also was the primary architect of the expansion of the Sikh empire. He was this sort of legendary warrior. He was known as the champion of the Khalsa, and he earned the cognomen, the name of the Bagmar, and I think that's Punjabi for tiger killer, after allegedly killing a tiger with his bare hands and a dagger. I don't know how true that is, but that's how legends are born. What a guy. He's most celebrated for taming the northwest frontier, this whole Khyber Pass area that is now obviously in present-day Pakistan. But that was basically his area of operations. He became a legendary figure in that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, as it's called nowadays. But basically it's the northwest province, the northwest frontier. And he pushed the Sikh border of the empire through that mouth, through the Khyber Pass. I myself have been through the Khyber Pass. He pushed the empire through his military operations, and a feat that's actually eluded invaders for centuries afterwards. Even the Russians struggled, the Pakistan struggled, everybody struggled to get through that Khyber Pass militarily. And so again, it created this fearsome reputation. And apparently even Afghan mothers reportedly use his name to quiet unruly children, saying, Hari Ragle, Hari Singh is coming. So he was used this figure of fear because he was so legendary to if you're a naughty child and he was used against you as a naughty child, behave yourself or else Hari Singh Nalwa will come for you. So now the installation of this bust, it is a great gesture. It stands in stark contrast to the barriers basically preventing Sikhs from visiting the corridor. And again, we do know that the wretched Indian government have stopped after the Pahalgam attacks last year and Operation Sindoor that followed, this tension, this rising potential war between India and Pakistan. India closed the border to Sikhs to cross the Kartarpur corridor to the Gurdwara. Pakistan didn't. Pakistan said, no, you're very welcome. We won't stop you. But the Indian government stopped Sikhs from travelling from Punjab up through the corridor up to visit the Gurdwara. Now, this corridor itself, it was established in 2019. It was as a part of agreement between the two countries. It was a visa-free access to this Gurdwara, the Gurdwara Darbar Sahib, which, as I said, is so important because it's the final resting place of the first Guru, Guru Nanak Dev Ji. But it has, of course, become a bit of a flashpoint between India and Pakistan. And, of course, it was closed after those attacks in April last year, the Pahalgam attacks. And India suspended travel through that corridor, saying security concerns. Of course, it was a deliberate act just to try and upset local Sikhs. Another attack on local Sikhs. Now, India maintained the blockade, but Pakistan repeatedly states that its end of the corridor remains open 24/7 to pilgrims. If you want to come and visit the Gurdwara, you're welcome. And this difference between the Indian and Pakistan stance has led to a lot of frustration, unsurprisingly, amongst the community. They've argued their religious freedom is being sacrificed for political strategy by the Indian government. Again, it's an appalling act. Anyway, so the timing of this bust on the February the 1st coincided with Modi's visit to Punjab. So it sends out an interesting message. And many, of course, in the Sikh community had hoped when Modi visited Punjab a few days ago that he would announce the reopening of the corridor as a goodwill gesture. He didn't, though. No such announcement was made. And the silence has caused really deep disappointment among Sikh leaders and organisations, from the SGPC right across the Damdani Taxal, who described the continued denial of the access as, in their words, a grave injustice. Now, diaspora Sikhs continue to visit freely from the West. The Sikhs in Indian Punjab are locked out of their own spiritual home. It's disgusting, it's appalling, but it's the Indian government for you. Now, I just want to show you, for those who want to sort of visualise, let me find this for you. Here we go. This is the Kartarpur corridor. I'll just zoom out. Obviously Punjab there. That's the border between India and Pakistan. The Kartarpur corridor is here to give you some geography. That's Amritsar there. You can see Amritsar. That's the border between Pakistan and India. Kartarpur corridor, just north of Amritsar. And through that quirk of partition fate, The border went down here. There's the river. And zoom in. There it is. Guru Nanak Highway that goes across the border. There's the border crossing there. Up to the Gurdwara complex there. The final resting place of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So that's what we're talking about. And sadly, the border runs down the wrong side of the river there, which has locked Sikhs in Punjab, Indian Punjab, out of the Gurdwara. Very sad. So, there you go. Let's move on. And a quick final story. Just a reminder, actually, this one. I did cover this last week. The Sikh Political Leadership Training Programme. This is a wonderful programme. Again, established by the Sikh Coalition, who have covered already tonight. I want to play you a quick video. And this is a reminder. If you want to get involved in politics, if you feel motivated, you're an activist, a campaigner, you feel strongly, obviously, about Sikh issues. If you're obviously a Sikh yourself and you are a resident of United States of America, you have the ability to apply for this wonderful program. It is called the Sikh Political Leadership Training Program. It will train you to be a future leader. It will train you to be a politician, to stand for election in all sorts of different contexts. But it will train you, it will give you all the skills you need, all the knowledge you need, all the way from fundraising, all the way to how to speak publicly, how to use the press, how to speak to the press, etc. It will give you all these sorts of skills so that you can go out there, be an advocate for the Sikh community. It's a fantastic program. It's a huge opportunity for anybody out there who wants to get involved in a more active basis, who wants to represent their communities. These opportunities are so rare. So please, if you even think about it, if you have any tendency in this direction, give it a go, because again, this opportunity is such a fabulous opportunity to give you the skills that you would need to get out there, campaign for all these issues that we talk about on a regular basis. I want to show you a quick video that this is somebody who has benefited already from this. Have a look at this. Let me press play for you so you can see it.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Suk Kaur and I represent District 1 in the city of San Antonio. I am so excited to hear about Sikh Coalition's newest program, Govt, the Sikh Political Leadership Training Program. This is going to be a game changer for Sikh representation in political office. When I first started running in 2023, there was so much that I didn't know, and I felt like I needed a lot of support. And so this program will provide you with just that. We know representation matters now more than ever. We need more folks in office to make sure that every single member of our community has a voice at the table and is safe during these really tough times. So if you're interested in serving for public office, please consider applying. These are the things you need to know. 1, you have to be a self-identifying member of the Sikh community. 2, you have to be eligible in the jurisdiction in which you live. And 3, you got to be considering running in 2026 or 2027. If you are, please apply. The deadline is February 27th. And if you have any questions about what it means to serve in public office, please give me a buzz, send me a DM. I'd be happy to chat.
In her own words, it's a game changer. It is. This is an extraordinary opportunity. So again, as I said in the intro, if you have any inkling, if you have any tendency to be active and you want to get involved at a more public level, absolutely, this is a game changer. It gives you this wonderful set of training to stand for election. And don't forget, you don't have to do it this year. I think it's a rolling program on an annual basis where they will offer you the training for the immediate intake. And I think the applications close at the end of this month, so do get in there. But this year's intake is for election for this year and next year. If you're not ready for it, don't worry. But you can apply next year for the following year's campaigns. So again, it's a rolling program set up by the Sikh Coalition. Get involved. Why not? Particularly if you feel strongly and you're motivated by such issues as we talk about here on this show. Get out there, get active, get campaigning. As this lady said, it's a real game changer. So, okay, let's move on to our comments section. Here we go. As always, a big thank you to our wonderful audience for so many wonderful contributions. As I say, I do read every single comment, and I appreciate every single comment. I do. Even if you don't appear on the comment section here, they get noted, and it's always very difficult to select those that I should talk about. But anyway, Parwinder Singh starts us off today. And this is, again, a topic we talk regularly about. The fake Sikhs, or Sikhs who claim they're Sikhs and don't really seem to sort of represent things that we believe the general, or I believe the mainstream Sikh community think about. As you say, what you're saying is Sikh lookalikes are betraying their own Sikhs. This refers to politicians to stay in power. It happens every time. Yes, indeed. This is talk about Sikh politicians who are now being openly accused of aligning more with party politics than the very people who elected them, particularly from their own community. They are Sikh lookalikes, as you rightly say, Powinder, but they're not really acting as Sikhs. They have a moral obligation. They actually have even a democratic obligation to represent those who elect them, to represent the Sikh community. But for some reason, they're not. And this is an accusation that is levelled in Canada, in North America to a slightly lesser degree, but certainly to a great degree here in the UK, where even our own Sikh MPs here in the UK have been accused by the community of betraying our own Sikh community here in the UK. For example, letters that have been, lobbying letters that have been written by the Sikh Federation and then signed by our Sikh MPs against, for example, things like transnational oppression, investigation into the British government's involvement in 1984, was signed by Sikh MPs, some of whom then rescinded, withdrew their signatures, presumably under pressure from India. So again, betrayal runs deep, even amongst our own Sikh politicians. There are some wonderful, notable exceptions to that. Some of our Sikh MPs do amazingly good work here in the UK, likewise in North America and other places. But certainly some of them, as you rightly say, are lookalikes, question their own Sikhi principles. As you rightly say, Khalistan Zindabad, we don't revenge, we avenge our fallen. That's a distinction. Thank you, Powinder, for pointing that out. Hari Singh, thanks to the Sikh Federation, UK, for the wonderful job. Yes, indeed, the Sikh Federation does a great work, but it has expanded globally. It is now the Sikh Federation International. It has an entity, an affiliation in Canada, and I think in 4 other nations around the world, being established, being set up to unite the Sikh voice. Again, it's all about uniting the disparate voices around the world, across the diaspora, uniting all the voices, funneling them into a more powerful central voice in terms of the Sikh Federation International, which has done great work, particularly for the Khalistan movement. So, yeah, huge thanks from all of us to the work that they do. Satnam Khalsa, yes, indeed, this was a suggestion that a Sikh should stand for Mayor of London. We have a Muslim Mayor of London in the form of Sadiq Khan, who is a very divisive figure. He represents the Muslim community in a very, very, I have to say, very partisan manner. In a very, basically, most of his policies seem to benefit Muslims, the Islamic community, to the detriment of all other communities. A very divisive figure who has overseen a dreadful deterioration, I have to say, of our capital city. And I'm certainly no fan of his, I have to say. The solution, the one, and of course there's all sorts of candidates who've been put up for the next election to become mayor of London. No one candidate seems to sort of unite all the different communities in London, except this wonderful suggestion that came the other day. A Sikh mayor will be fair to all people and of course to the planet. If there was one religion according to AI to run the world, it should be Sikhi, for all the reasons that we're all familiar with. Angus Scott. Now, another factor is unemployment of young people. This is, of course, the problem about youngsters and young thugs who revert to hate crimes. Wherever you are in the diaspora, the community sadly is subject to hate crimes. And many of the perpetrators of these hate crimes tend to be the young, because frankly, they've got nothing better to do, as Amrik says. Another factor is unemployment. They're all sitting around. They've no shelter, no benefit. They've no opportunity to improve their lives, their miserable plight, as you refer to. As they say, the devil always finds work for idle hands. In other words, when they're sitting on their backsides with nothing to do and no hope, that's the key. If they've got no hope, and this is equally applicable in London as to Amritsar or Jalandhar or any other town, village in Punjab, exactly the same problem. If they're sitting on their hands with no prospects, no job, no employment, and no hope, what are they going to do? They're going to revert to crime because the testosterone filled. They need something to fill their days. So you're absolutely right. It's and this actually really, I think this comment, although it applies, I think, to here in the UK, it is more applicable in somewhere like Punjab, where deliberate policies are poisoning our youth, literally with drugs in many cases, to undermine and dissolve the cohesive nature of Punjab society held together by Sikhi. And that's a deliberate tactic on behalf of the RSS. Now, Avtar Singh Khanda, this is an interesting one. You said you've spoken to Sir Michael Ancram. Sir Michael Ancram, for those who don't know, he was a very senior figure in the Conservative Party, that is the right-wing party here in the UK. He was a senior minister. He had a long political career. He's an aristocrat as well. So basically he should know better. And you say, Avtar, that you spoke to Sir Michael. Why should Sikhs join British forces when the British government, firstly, didn't give Sikhs their own homeland, soldiers didn't get pensions, kept Sikh contributions to the British Empire, historically, and in 2 world wars, he didn't even recognise or know that Sikhs served in the British Army. As a British historian, he should have been ashamed of himself, or indeed hated. I think this is absolutely appalling. Interesting that you've spoken to Sir Michael Ancram. That's fascinating, actually, that you had the opportunity to speak to him. And I have to say, on behalf of British white people, I am appalled and ashamed that somebody who frankly should know better didn't even know that Sikhs served. Even I, before I ever got involved in the Sikh community, even I knew Sikhs had served magnificently in the community, in the British Army and through world wars. Most British people on the street, I even showed a viral video not that long ago about how even ordinary British people, working class people, are fully aware of the contribution the Sikh community has made to this nation, whether socially, charitably, militarily. They're all aware. As many people have said, many women particularly have said, their fathers have said to young girls as children or as young women as they grow up, if you're ever in trouble, go find a Sikh. They'll help you and protect you. I mean, there could not be a better vindication and validation of a human being than that, frankly. And this guy, Sir Michael Ancram, this is true. This is it's shameful that he had absolutely no knowledge of it. Again, it's all about education, not punishment. It's all about education. He needed educating about Sikh's contribution. TC and Stay Safe had a fantastic conversation on this thread, and it went on at great length, and it was a very well thought out conversation. And sadly, we don't have time to go through it in great detail. But it was, and I have to say thanks to you guys, 2 of our regulars who regularly appear on our comments columns and regularly have actually very, very interesting contributions to make. And I've literally just cherry picked a few sort of comments from that long discussion they had between it, because the message, the theme is actually very clear and it's very relevant. TC starts us off saying, about loads of negative comments, that there are huge deficits in education, accrued fear and hate. And again, this comes back to this, again, the hate crimes. Should we punish them? And of course, there was the debate in comments relating to when these 3 guys were charged for the hate crime against this, basically, it was a basic assault against 2 taxi drivers. Should we track them down and beat them up? Is that the right way forward? Should we punish them, in other words, as a community? Or should we educate them? And TC is very clear about this. Look, we need to educate them because they have, as you say, a huge deficit. In other words, they are ill-educated. They've grown fear and they've grown hate just through a lack of education. And as TC says, peace and love to all our viewers, even the haters. Don't ruin your life stewing in hate, blaming others for your own failures. Educate yourself. Strive for a better, happier life. And that in itself, in a nutshell, I think is really, I suppose that's Sikhi in a nutshell. In other words, let's be understanding. Let's not punish people who do these crimes. Let's understand them, why they've done it, and then educate them. Because in terms of recidivism, that's a funny word, in terms of rehabilitating them, in other words, to stop them doing it again, and actually turn them into becoming advocates for Sikhi, is just to explain to them. Firstly, ask them, why have you done this? And then educate them, explain to them why they shouldn't be doing it. Stay Safe came back and says, look, many think it's a waste of time trying to debate and argue with these people. You can't do it. Engaging in logical debate and factual conversation with some humour is very important. And again, this is, and I'm guilty of this on social media, where I try and engage a lot of these haters in all aspects, whether it's immigration or anti-Sikh rhetoric or whatever. You try and engage these people, Some of them just it's a closed book. They got the shutters down. You cannot educate some of these people. So you have to be humorous, as Stay Safe says. You've got to be patient, educational, engage in logical and factual debate. Sadly, you might be being a bit naive there, Stay Safe. Some of these people just don't want to. You try and you're wasting your breath. But anyway, certainly you must make the effort. And as TC replies, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're not born full of hate or preconceived ideas or beliefs. We're not born racist. We, for some reason, through the context of our society, some of us become racist for whatever reasons, whether it's through certain events they witness, whether it's through being educated to be racist. In other words, in society, if your society is institutionally or socially racist, that's the way you're brought up. Look at the UK in the 1970s, for example. It'll be the same in North America, Australia, wherever you are in the diaspora. Certainly, decades ago, and I know here in the UK, 1970s was a terrible time for the Sikh community. The racism was so ingrained, so embedded in British society, not just against Sikhs, against all people of colour or ethnicities. And you only need to watch television programmes from those dates, and I'm laughing because I just can't believe some of the things that were said. But in those times, it was normal. This is why many programmes from the 1970s can't be repeated today, or if they are, they're always preceded with a trigger warning. This programme contains things that you may find offensive, or words that you may find offensive, because in the 1970s they were mainstream. There is a wonderful, I'm going for a sidetrack here, there's a wonderful programme, a comedy programme from the 1970s here in the UK called It Ain't Half Hot Mum. And it's just it's a fabulously joyous comedy programme. It's about the British in India. I think it's in an army camp, if I remember correctly. I haven't seen it for 30, 40 years because they cannot show it today because they see it as racist. And it contained this Indian figure wearing a turban. And I think he was a Sikh, actually. I'll have to check. But the actor who portrayed this character, and he was hilarious. I have to say, I'm laughing now thinking about it. And I hope it's not offensive. It was of its time. But this guy, it was a white actor who portrayed a Sikh. And this is why they say it was racist. It's blacked up. He was painted, in a dark skin colour, wore a turban. So it was deeply offensive. Actually, it was comedy, and that was what was comedy at the time. But ironically, as it turned out, I only discovered this recently, the white actor who portrayed that, he was born in India. He also, when he was interviewed by an Indian lady, and accused of, this is later in life, he was accused of being a racist. How dare you insult India? And this guy said to him, yeah, I'm a white English actor, but I was born in India. I also speak several Indian languages. As it turns out, he spoke more Indian languages fluently than the Indian lady interviewing him. So, stick that in your pipe and smoke it, I think was the message. But anyway, I'm going for a tangent there. But it ain't half hot, mum. I have to say, and I'm sure, I no doubt many in our British audience who watched that, I hope you weren't offended by it. I'm sure you weren't, because we're all grown-ups. We can watch stuff without being too offended. We can see comedy for what it is. But if you feel differently, let me know. If you're in the audience in the UK and you remember that programme and you were offended by it, let me know. I'm fascinated to know the community's feelings on that one. So, anyway, I've gone down a bit of a tangent there, so my apologies. But anyway, thanks TC, Stay Safe, for that long and interesting debate about all that. Basically, in other words, the whole message from the debate was, look, we're all equal. Let's all just love each other instead of attacking each other. So, Parwinder Singh comes back and says, the channel's not available in India. Yes, indeed, we are blocked in India. Can I use my channel to summarise and take a few clips so I can make educational content on Khalistan for Indian-occupied Punjab? Well, what I would first of all prefer you to do, Parwinder, is obviously try and get more people in Punjab to watch this channel, the source material, because yeah, we are blocked, but there are ways to watch us in India through VPNs, through changing your YouTube settings to a different country, etc. In other words, please obviously promote us. But yes, you can use clips from perspectives, as long, and here's the big caveat that's important, that you do include our Satluj logo. Please do ensure that the Satluj logo is there, because there have been all sorts of TikTok channels and other channels that have stolen our material. Of course, our material is copyright, and they've basically just cut me out and kept me and my voice, but cut out the logo, any branding of Satluj TV, and then they've got millions of views, ironically, whether in India or across the world. Basically, they're getting revenue from adverts from are efforts that we are paying for. Don't forget, we're not funded by YouTube. We don't get any money. We're blocked. We've been demonetized. So unfortunately, in the context of that, Pawinder, you need to understand that we obviously need to try and retain at least some control over our channel and certainly our branding. But yes, absolutely, ultimately, we are aligned in the same goal. We want to get the truth out there. We do want more people in the Punjab to know the truth. So all I would ask you, and from a reasonable perspective, please be reasonable about it. Absolutely, yes, you can promote the material, but do try and at least respect our copyright, our logo, etc., etc. Use some common sense, and I'm sure you'll work it out. So thank you, Swagwalla. Massive respect. You give us a morale boost. Absolutely, I'm delighted. Just like Canadian James Cosno. Miss James. Yeah, we do. We all do. Your voice is iconic. It's very coarse and gravelly with a British English accent. Well, my voice has never been described as coarse and gravelly. I think coarse and gravelly is a bit like that. But sadly, but anyway, I was delighted that you appreciate my voice. Thank you for your lovely comment, and that did make me chuckle. And Motor Wally Cycle says, you are the God's man doing God's work. May Guruji bless you and your family. Well, thank you. That's, again, a very touching comment. I have been described as I am doing God's work. I'm not deliberately acting on behalf of God. I would never presume to be acting on behalf of God. I am just doing my job. But it happens, fortunately, as many have said, just through fate, through God's machinations, through the work of the universe. I sit in this seat promoting, and I have to say very passionately promoting, the whole premise of Khalistan, promoting Sikh issues, because I do feel deeply aligned with them. So, yeah, as they say, God works in mysterious ways, so maybe that is why I sit in this seat doing this work. And thank you, and bless you and all our audience and all your families. We are one united family. So, Mr. 403, yes, refers to my impression, which a few of you picked up on, my impression of Keir Starmer, which was dreadful, I have to say. That timestamp refers to my impression of Keir Starmer, which I won't repeat because it was awful. But if you want to go torture your ears and torture your brain, go have a look at my impression of Keir Starmer. So thank you for appreciating that. And then as a final wrap-up, thank you, Emily Mole. Welcome to the channel. Khalistan Zindabad. Free Khalistan from Indian-occupied Punjab. I couldn't agree more. Our audience couldn't agree with you more. As indeed Darshang Singh agrees. Khalistan Zindabad. So good you said it twice. Ragveer Singh, Khalistan Zindabad, and Gurmeet Singh. Khalistan Zindabad. Indeed, those are the words that ring in our ears as we sign off every show. Thank you to all of you who've contributed. Don't forget, you can message me directly. I read all your emails. Thank you for each of you who have emailed me at message@satlogetv.com if you'd like to send me a link to something you think I should know about, news stories that I should be researching, etc. You can, of course, comment below the video. Please do that. As I say, I read every comment. Every comment gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling, even if it's just a one-worder or a good morning or whatever. Many of you just drop in with a little emoji, whatever. All appreciated. It all gives us, on this side of the camera, that warm, fuzzy feeling that you're out there and you appreciate what we're doing. But of course, I do appreciate you. I couldn't do this show without you, so do keep the comments coming. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the love. Very much appreciated. And it's all reciprocated back to you guys. That's it for another day. I will be back tomorrow, God willing, with another Perspectives. That's it. Thanks so much for watching Perspectives. I will see you again tomorrow.